The secret to fundraising is not statistics, it's stories. The more stories you tell, the more people will identify and give to that person. Once a week I sit in with the volunteers and open the mail. Everyone's trying to find the biggest check or the biggest donation. But for me, the real hero, not the person who can afford it, it's the person who can't afford it. I don't want passionate people, I want compassionate people, because passion runs out after a while, but compassion doesn't. If you're going to wait for all the lights to be green before you leave home, you'll never leave home.
Yeah.
All right, but if you've got a couple of green lights, let's start the journey and work it out as we go. If you have to have a hard or difficult discussion, let's call them genuine discussions, not hard or difficult. And there's two aspects of a genuine discussion. One is your intention is pure. You're not trying to beat the other person or show them how clever you are and that you believe it to be right at the time.
All right, welcome back to the Quest for Success podcast, and thanks for tuning in once again. Today on the show, we're really looking forward to this conversation because we're sitting down with Scott Chapman, who is the ex-CEO of the Royal Flying Doctors Service of Victoria. He's a member of the Order of Australia. He's on a countless number of boards and is very experienced, and so really excited to learn from you and your story, Scott. So thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's tremendous, and I'm sure this is probably the earliest interview you've ever done. It's about 7 o'clock here, so in the morning.
And a cold winter day. Yeah.
After a big night of fundraising for
And thank you so much for coming down to have a chat with us, Scott.
So Scott, this podcast is all about success. And so I want to start there. For you, what does success actually mean?
It's a very interesting question. And I was thinking about this when I saw the title of your podcast. And to me, success is about the impact you actually make. It's not about how much you put into something, how much money goes in, how many patients you look after, those sorts of things. It's about what comes out the other end, the output or the actual impact. There's lots of good ideas in the world. And I always say to the boards I sit on when we're doing strategic planning days, I say, look, I don't want any good ideas because they get in the way of the great ideas. And the difference between the two is that the great ideas actually land. They actually, the rubber hits the road, they happen, they have impact. Otherwise, a lot of red herrings with lots and lots of good ideas. So it's the great ideas. So to me, success is something that is impactful. It makes a difference.
100%. And Scott, for us to understand a little bit more about the man we're sitting down with, I'd love to go back to the early days. Can you walk us through a little bit of your upbringing and especially how you think it's shaped who you've become?
Gee, that's going back a bit. Look, I'm the oldest of three boys. Dad was a salesman. He worked at Luna Park as the waffle man. So that was a great after school. I'd go to Luna Park and have an hour or two as in primary school. Mum was a stay-at-home mum, but they certainly put thought into our upbringing. Little things, and they wanted to make sure that we were good citizens. So I remember, there were old-fashioned dances, and Mum would say, "The men never dance. My three boys are not going to be those men." So we'd have to do if you want dinner, come with me. And she loved it also because she was the only woman or the only girl in the household, so she had four men. We had to go and do the Pride of Erin in the lounge room, right? Or an evening three-step or whatever the old-fashioned dance was before you got your dinner. So it was that kind of an upbringing. Dad was transferred over to New Zealand. So between the ages 6 and 9, I was over there. All in all, I went to 9 different primary schools, which you could say was disruptive. But for me, it just meant I could get on with anybody because you had to survive. So it was a pretty privileged upbringing. Mum and Dad pretty much teetotalers. I don't drink. I don't feel the necessity to try and prove myself, especially when you're going through your teenage years, have to drink or have to smoke to be accepted. So they gave me the strength of conviction, I guess. And that was it. I didn't know what I wanted to be. So and in those days, there was no career planning,
Yeah.
you were given a book. One book was called The Key to Your Career, and that was one book for the whole year level, and you're allowed to take it home for one night.
Oh.
So in alphabetical order, one career to a page, you're trying to work out what I want to be for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But I knew I didn't want to be a salesman. That was good. We enjoyed it. We always had to line up at the door when Dad had his work colleagues come for dinner, and we'd have to shake their hand, and then we'd disappear and not allowed to be seen again. And they'd have their dinner in the main lounge room. So it was a good look. It was a good upbringing. We, three sons have all done well. We're not geniuses, but I guess it was teaching that I thought would be a good career. And I went off and started primary teaching. I was pretty good at sport and playing pretty high level sport. And David Parkin, who was a famous footballer, AFL, coach of Hawthorn, coach of Carlton, who was a lecturer there, and he said, you should be doing the phys ed degree. So I did the phys ed degree, but halfway through that, I thought, this is good, and I could make a difference. But to me, it was all about community.
Yeah.
And so I went and did a youth work degree. And the career's interesting over time. I never went into a school. I went straight into outdoor education, taking trips down the Franklin River and snow survival trips into the snow, and teaching bushwalking skills. I then went into community services in councils. I then ended up in the ANZ Bank somehow. Lasted 10 months, and I went back to community again.
Uh-huh.
So I've always been drawn back to that. Now that I look back on the career, of course I'm now retired.
Yeah.
But it's not really a retirement. I'm busier now than I've ever been, which I love.
But you end up in working for the government.
Yes. So my first job out of university was the Department of Youth, Sport and Recreation. So state government. And that was where I was doing, they owned all these old facilities that were no longer used in other government departments. So they'd give those things and say, make a camp out of it. So we had 6 camps. One was the Kiewa Valley electricity scheme up in Falls Creek. And when they'd finished building that, the housing for the workers, we'll give it to youth, sport and recreation. They can run snow camps. And there was an old orphanage out in the outskirts of Melbourne. When that was closed, we'll give it to so it was a time of awareness of perhaps being outdoors, a bit of fitness, a bit of activity. Life unit was a big thing at the time, and I was part of all of that. So that was government. So I've worked at state government, I've worked at federal government, I've worked at local government. Local government is the Director of Community Services. I've worked in private enterprise as the CEO of the Southgate development along the Yarra River there in Melbourne. Then into the Melbourne City Council as their Director of Marketing, major events, tourism, attracting people. But I then kept going back. This is all good, but I gravitate back to if I can't do it in my work, I do it in my volunteer life, and that's that making an impact on community.
Yeah. And Scott, did you always knew that you were born to lead?
It's a very good question. In a way, I've always, feeling comfortable with people you first meet. Going through university, I was going to find a job, and I was working at the YMCA doing bits and pieces, but I also had a job at the local hotel.
Uh-huh.
Now, when you're a barman at the age of about 19, and you've got people who are coming and going, you become the master of the 5-second conversation. I was always, I guess, I went to Cubs and I ended up as the head of the patrol or whatever it was called, and then I went to Scouts and ended up as the group leader. And I played footy, ended up as a captain. So in a way, I was kind of put into these, not because I was any better, but I don't know what it was, but it just felt a comfortable or natural spot. I don't need to lead, but every committee or board I get on, somehow I end up as the chairman or the president or the leader. So maybe the answer is yes. I've never thought about it.
Yeah.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. I just have a favor to ask before we begin. If you've been enjoying these conversations and want more stories that redefine success, please do us a massive favor and hit the subscribe button over on our YouTube channel. It literally takes 2 seconds to do and is completely free. It's a small gesture, but it makes a massive difference for us as it really helps us to grow the show. And with that, let's get into the episode. And I want to know, like, how did you end up in that kind of board or executive role? Because, you know, obviously starting out as a teacher, it's not the natural progression.
I've always had a lot of energy, and I overcommit, as you'll see. Sit on 13 boards at the moment and chair 11, and I'm the deputy chair of the other one, or two. Whenever I was in a career, I'd want to know, well, where does that career take? You know, how does that industry work? Is there a parent body? You know, is there a membership organisation? Is there an advocacy? And you know, how do we make the industry perhaps better? So I'd volunteer for those things. They were always related to the job I had at the time. So, you know, at Southgate, which was retail, you know, or the Retailers Association, what do they do?
Yeah.
So there was a natural curiosity, but also, so I was drawn to know, well, what was bigger than what I'm doing now? Still, obviously, you know, being true and truthful to and loyal to the, you know, to whoever's paying you. But you could bring stuff. So when I was working in sport, I was also the CEO of snow skiing. I was drawn to the Victorian Sports Association, which all the sporting organisations belong to, and somehow got on their committee. I then did a master's, but I didn't do an MBA. I did a master's in business management. Now that's more focused on getting the best out of others than it is about economics and accounting. Some say it might have been a softer master's, but it did me well because, again, I see organisations not as, well, there's processes and there's policies and everything else, but at the end of the day, it's a collection of people that come together trying to do the best they can with the tools that they've been given in life. How do you work and get the best? And that might have come from doing a lot of outdoor thing, you know, taking 8 people, you know, on a 12-day wilderness trip. You've got to be able to get the best out of them so that we all, you know, survive at the end.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And Scott, I want to know, like, what drew you to the Royal Flying Doctors Service? Because it's such an iconic Australian organisation.
It was, and it was an interesting part. I was about 52, 53. I just finished 10 years, 2 5-year contracts at the City of Melbourne as one of the 5 directors. So there's the directors, the CEO, then the council. So you're at the the top end of 3,000 staff, and I was not keen on signing up for another 5 years, and so I left with no real idea of where I was going to go. In fact, it was probably a bit of a career crisis. As I tell my kids, not every job's more than the job you had before. There's probably a couple of dips on the way, but as long as you end up further up than when you started, you've probably had a good career.
Good advice.
And I saw someone referred me to somebody, and they said, the Flying Doctors, and I said, well, aren't they in the desert? And I live in Victoria. And they said, no, it's a federated model. So every state has a Flying Doctor service. Yeah. But so I've never heard of one in Victoria. And the reason is that, and interestingly, the Flying Doctors were actually begun in Victoria. John Flynn, the founder, was born in Malidewell, just outside of Bendigo in Victoria. The doctor who he first worked with, Simpson, was from Malvern in Melbourne. The first donor was H.V. Mackay of the International Harvester, Sunshine Harvester, sorry. And he was a great philanthropist, and he was from, Sunshine, the suburb in the end. It was named after actually his company. So it was a story of those sort of people. The person who began, the radio, the pedal radio, was born in country Victoria. And the person who actually gave John Flynn the idea of the aeroplanes was in Western Victoria. So, and the first meeting was in the Melbourne Town Hall,
There you go.
and Victoria started the Flying Doctors by opening the very first base in the Kimberley. So, although, and this is in a time when the money was in the capital city and the population, but the need was certainly in the outback. And we ran that for 70 years, and then gave it to Western Australia when they were big enough to run it themselves. We came back to Victoria, and just for 10 years became a fundraising auxiliary,
Yeah.
I guess, distributing the money to other states.
Yeah.
And when I came in 2010, and there was only 5 part-time staff, we'd run a dinner and tax appeal, through letters. We're raising about $1 million. We'd be giving that to Western Australia and putting, some money in the bank. So at that stage, we were a $2 million business or service with no services at all in Victoria. And I thought, there's 3 things here. We've got money in the bank, so if I muck it up, I've got a couple of years to see how I go. A greenfield site and a brand to kill for, the Royal Flying Doctor Service. When I left 14 years later, we were turning over $65 million.
Amazing.
Just under 1,000 staff. Wow. And we were doing more than just flying doctors royally. We have obviously aircraft, but I believe that we shouldn't be captured by our brand. We're not. It's not an edict. It's not a law that you only fly doctors, and in fact we have more nurses. We do a lot of road work. We had 120 ambulances doing non-emergency backup to the ambulance service, the emergency ambulance service, and we also got into community building, going back to my roots again. So, one of the biggest costs to the health system is missed appointments. Not the appointment you miss at the time, which means the doctor or the hospital or whatever doesn't get their $65 from you or Medicare or your insurance. But if you miss an appointment, then often things get more chronic, and then you're a bigger burden on the health system. So we got into community transport, and it was easy. We had a brand we put on the side of a car, Royal Flying Doctor Service, community transport. We got volunteer communities. We got the local Lions Club to provide the petrol. We'd provide 2 vehicles, and a donor would give you the money for that. And then a volunteer service would pick people up, take them to their appointment, mainly in rural and rural areas, rural regional areas, stay with the person, and then take them home again. Friendships would form, reliances would, and in a way, it was the volunteers probably got as much out of it from a mental health point of view, and about being or feeling important again, being needed by their community, as much as the person needed the lift in. So there's a lot of stories, and I just said, let's apply the brand to the need, even if the need is not emergency rescue.
But coming from government to charity organization, that's quite different, right? Have you had any experience in raising funds?
Yeah, well, I wasn't a fundraiser, and it is quite different. But in a way, it's the same, because I used to always say to my staff in government, this is not our money. This is the public's money. Are we spending it wisely? Be good if governments had that discussion now. Are we spending it wisely? We are just custodians of it. It's not our money. We're not a private company. With charities, it's the same. People are giving you, in most cases, they're donating money. We also can donate time and donate skills, but donating money, and they're trusting you with their money. So, in a way, that was a bit similar. The learnings of governance in government, how to do proper reporting and recommendations and following policies. I took a lot of that with me and brought that discipline of government accountability into charities. The reason I got into a charity, I guess, as I said, I'd worked at federal, state, and this is a bit how I work in my life. Federal, state and local, okay, so I've done government. I've done private enterprise.
Yeah.
I've done retail. I've done a sport. I've been the boss of a sport. And although I had been on lots of committees and boards raising money or providing services, like you're on the local footy club because your kids are playing footy. So, how do we make sure that they have a good season and that that we're financially sustainable? But I hadn't actually worked in a charity, so I thought, okay, that's where I'll to round out your career, and it did round it out. And it was fantastic. So, so whereas Victoria had no flying doctor service, it became almost the largest provider of services, not always just aeroplanes in the air, which is probably more needed in
rural
in the remote areas of Australia. Yep.
And Scott, you I was reading, and you managed to convince the board to sink like around $5 million into face-to-face fundraising. I want to know, like, from that experience, how do you build conviction in these ideas?
So in not-for-profits and charities, and there's 65,000 registered charities in Australia at the moment, with about 4,000 being added every year, and about 3,000 winding up. On boards of causes, and most charities are built around a cause, people who volunteer or come onto those boards are drawn to the cause. They want to make a change. I now lecture internationally and nationally for a company called Revolutionise International on convincing boards that if there's no money, there's no mission. So you can be as mission driven as you like, but if you can't afford to do, you've got no money to do it. So the question comes down to, do we keep every dollar we get? Do we spend on the service, the cause, the need, or do we say, well, actually, we're in the health business, or we're in the transport business if we're talking about the flying doctors or CDF, but we're also in the fundraising business. And as I said last night at this dinner, it's competitive, it's regulated, like any business is. So we have to invest in, you have to spend money to make money.
Yeah.
And the conviction is going back to your question, Dylan, is do we take money away from the service in the short term so we can provide more services in the long term? And that comes down to giving boards permission to do that. But it's hard because fundraisers don't tend to sit on boards. People who want to deliver and make a difference do. So it's about getting them to see the light. And I'm a great believer that you can't be a prophet in your own land. You've got to bring someone in from next door to say what you want to say, and that must be right. Yeah. So for the flying doctors, I brought in a guy from Scotland who was doing this. He was the head of Revolutionise, and he spoke. We ran the hard part was getting the board together for a day, just because they're all business people, to listen to a guy about fundraising. At the end of it, I remember the chairman came up and said, "I get it. We got to invest in this part of the business as well, because usually it's let's do the strategic planning. Here's all the things we need. Now, by the way, fundraising. We've worked out our expenses. You go away and bring the money in." So, well, that's we also need a strategic plan for how to do that, and that's what happened. So I said to the chairman, I don't know how at the moment, but give us 6 months and we'll come back with a business plan with projections and an investment strategy. And we came to the board, and it was $1 million a year for 5 years. We looked at the donor pyramid. You've got the first gift, which is often a go-away gift or a shut-up gift. Here, how do you convert people from a first gift to a second gift? In other words, how do you start to rust them onto your cause? Yeah. There's a skill in that. From that into a major gift, a bigger gift, which might be a one-off. And then obviously, the ultimate's a bequest, being a gift in the will. But the bit that was missing for us was regular giving. And in charities, you start on the 1st of July and you spend money providing services and hope you have a good Christmas appeal to top it up. Then you spend down again and hope you have a good tax appeal. And along the way, you might have a dinner or two or other bits and pieces. It's really hard to run a business like that, where you're always in debt, hoping that the generosity of people will get you. And world events can impact confidence in the people. First thing people do is hold back from donating because they need it for themselves.
100%.
But regular giving, which is people giving out of their wage or out of their bank on a monthly basis, $20 or whatever, it flattens out the year. So you've got a steady income. The business case to the board was within 2 years, we think we're spending money and it'll take us 2 years for it to come back and break even. Well, we did it in 14 months, which was the strength of the brand, and it's what got us through COVID. So, of course, when it crossed over, the board said, "Oh, well, we're making money now. We don't have to spend the last 3 years of $1 million." Well, actually, you do. You've got to replace people. You've got to service people. And you want to keep building it. So I think after about 5 years, and the board still invests $1 million now, we were bringing in invest $1 million, and it was about $7 million a year coming in. So that wasn't a bad investment. We had to take the dip or take some services away for the first couple of years, but now there's providing $65 million worth of services rather than $2 million a year.
Yeah, absolutely. That's incredible. And I want to know, you went from the 2019-2020 bushfires straight into COVID. As a leader, how do you lead through uncertain times like that?
There's a whole podcast on leadership in tough times. So I have a couple of things that help me go through, or to find my leadership journey, and that is first of all I recognise that everyone's coming with the skills that they've got, the tools that they've been given in life, and I have a fundamental belief that people want to and will do the right thing. So you need to believe in your people if you're delegating, but if you delegate, that doesn't mean you abrogate. You also need to just keep an eye on and help them, having a very open door policy, but it's about making decisions. Again, when I speak or lecture or talk or coach or mentor, I'll say if you're in a leadership position, you're paid to make a decision. If you have to make 10 decisions and you get 8 or 9 of them right, you're probably in the right job. If you only get 2 or 3 of them right, you're probably in the wrong job. Okay, and I'll do my best to help you make the right decisions. But at the end of the day, so it's a bit like bringing kids up. Don't let them climb in a tree; they'll fall. Well, they need to learn to climb. Let's do it in a way that they can do it as safely as possible. Even though my daughter did break her arm falling out of a tree, and I was in trouble after that. But they love the outdoors as I do the outdoor adventure. So it's around. It's having a couple of principles of leadership. It's also about resilience. We heard about that last night at a dinner for patient transport in Sri Lanka. 12 years. It's hard to keep coming back. Yeah. It's hard to keep raising $20 million a year when on the 30th of June, everyone's celebrating. Then on the 1st of July, I put 20 cents down with our head fundraiser and team and make a bit of a joke of it and say, and now we start again. And we build up another 20 million or whatever it is, or across Australia, 120 million for the flying doctors. But to do that year in, year out takes resilience.
Unbelievable.
And I would always use the story of John Flynn, who, he was born in Malayagal. He became a teacher. He went down. He taught for a while. He was he found a bigger calling to be a part of the church, and he was sent into the outback. And when he saw, and that was to be to spread the word of God. He was like a travelling padre. But he saw that there's a bigger need out here, or there's bigger need in health services, and as there is for that. Well, he went out in 1911, and the flying doctors began, as I said, Victoria. That meeting in the Melbourne Town Hall was in 1932. Had to go through war and everything else, but he held on to his dream. He became a bit of a pain in the backside in the end because he just wouldn't let go of that dream. But often change agents have to be.
Yeah.
And he lived until the 1950s, and he saw his dream come true. Well, it wasn't just a good idea one day, getting back to those good ideas, and 6 months later it's up and running. It was a great idea, but it took him nearly 20, 25 years to get it off the ground.
Yeah.
And in that time he stuck to it.
Yeah.
So that's another part of leadership, is that so when you come out of bushfires and you're into floods, and we're helping with evacuations, not just emergency evacuations, but also whole aged care facilities in areas, and getting staff to work at night or on weekends and those sorts of things. They need to see you as a leader in amongst it, not just sitting in your ivory tower giving instructions and going home at 5 o'clock because you've got something on. If they see that you're sacrificing, you're a part of it, you're happy to roll your sleeve up, not just in emergencies, but at any time, you do get pretty good fellowship. And I talk about fellowship as a whole skill. A lot of people talk about leadership, but if you're not leading anything, if no one's following, you're hardly leading. So that whole fellowship is a whole thing as well.
Is it more of like a servant leadership you're talking about?
Sometimes it is.
Yeah.
You need a master and servant relationship, adult-child relationship. Certainly if it gets to a point where it is a real emergency, or there is a decision to be made and you need to make a captain's call. But hopefully you don't get to that, because you've got your leadership team, you've recruited people, you've delegated them responsibility, not irresponsibly, but
You have to be there.
those who you've got faith in their skills. You work together. You also admit that you don't know. I don't know.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, there's no way I know as much as they know. I'm a generalist. I just try and bring people together. They're the experts, so you let them go. And if something does go wrong, you've got to tell them,
Yeah.
I've got your back.
Vulnerable.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, I want you to try it. And if it doesn't work, we've got your back. And that gives them the confidence to have a go. And 9 times out of 10, they just know what to do.
Yeah. You kind of had more than 120 roadside vehicles. How did you convince your donors, flying doctors is not just about flying?
Well, it wasn't the donors I had to convince. I had to convince the rest of the country, because flying doctors are an interesting cohort to work with. Yeah. Pilots are also a very interesting cohort. And in the outback, in a way, they're heroes. Yeah. And I remember getting a phone call. So in Victoria, I didn't need aeroplanes because we're not, we have aircraft, especially when we've got to repatriate people to other states. But by the time you got the call, the pilot got to the airport, you backed the plane out, you warmed it up, you took off. You could be there in an hour or an hour and a half by road. So I remember getting calls saying, but we're not road doctors, we're the flying doctors. Yeah. Well, I said, but before you were flying doctors, you're actually camel riding doctors in the days of John Flynn and before. And pretty soon you're probably going to end up as telephone doctors with the advent of telehealth. So let's get away from the toys and just say, we are doctors, or we are medical practitioners, or different allied health service providers. Let's forget about the method of delivery and concentrate on the patient. So we did get a contract with Ambulance Victoria here, and some insurance companies and some hospitals. And in talking to donors, donors give to you need a drop down menu. People just don't say, here's the money. A lot of people want capital. They want to buy humidity cribs for babies, or money towards an aeroplane, or money towards an ambulance. And I guess part of my marketing and retail expertise or experience was around, that gives us real estate. And the fact that if I don't know the flying doctors are in Victoria, not many others do either, and that's true. 120 ambulances actually gave me 120 billboards to
Yep.
drive around the state saying, oh, who are they? The flying doctors. I didn't know they were here. I need to find out more. And when we, establish these in different country areas, and this is doing the backup work for Ambulance Victoria. We weren't doing the emergency work. In other states we do, but in Victoria, government legislation is that only Ambulance Victoria does that emergency response. So St John's, who do it in some of the other states, ourselves, in here we can't. So we said, well, what if we did the non-emergency work, which means you guys are released to do the emergency work? And the definitions changed over time. So if you're playing footy on the weekend and someone breaks a leg, they ring an ambulance. Well, is it really an emergency? Not really, all right? You need medical help and support and possible transport, but it's not an emergency. It's not life and death.
Yeah.
That's the sort of stuff that we would do. If you're going to take a patient from hospital to home, or from home to hospital, or hospital to hospital, just transferring for something, that's what we do.
Yeah.
And Scott, I'd love to know, in a world of finite resources and infinite need, how do you decide what not to do?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if I even have an answer to that, because if you're driven to do more, to grow, you probably don't see the fact that it's impossible. So one thing that we did do, I was again, we talk about the competitive landscape of raising money. So I went to America to set up Friends of the Flying Doctor USA. We had one in the UK, and I thought, well, expats might want to support us. So one had to think out the box and then start to fundraise out of the box. And we've had some pretty good donations come from there. But I was over there, and it's night time, 3 o'clock, jet lag, wide awake, turn on the tally, as you do in America. 450 stations, trying to work out, I think 400 of them telling me which church to follow and which drug to take and who I can sue and all that sort of stuff. And I came across a documentary out of Holland, out of the Netherlands, and it was a paramedic who had picked up a patient, a 43-year-old cancer patient from hospital, and he was taking him to palliative care. So it was this guy's last trip. He put him into the back of the ambulance, and a phone call came through that said the palliative care bed's not ready for 4 hours. The paramedic said, well, I'll have to put you back in the bedroom, and the patient said, well, I've been in there for 6 months. I don't want to spend any more time in there. They got talking. They're probably about the same age, couple of blokes. He said, well, what I'd really like to do is just go back down to the harbour, to the docks where I worked for the last 20 years, smell the sea air again, listen to the horns, of the boats. So somehow it must have been a slow day on emergencies or something, but he got permission to do it. Took him down there. On the way, they rang this guy's family. The family rang his work colleagues, and they spent a day in a hospital stretcher with oxygen and a drip and everything else, and did a couple of laps, and it was like a celebration. Then he went off, and unfortunately he died a few weeks later. This paramedic was telling others, and someone said, my mother's got 3 months to live. How can we get her to the Rijksmuseum to have a look at this Rembrandt painting for the last time? Can you knock off an ambulance on a Saturday? I mean, I'm obviously Australianising that. And from that it grew, and he established a thing called the Wish Ambulance, and it was about final journeys for people. And I'm in tears watching this. I reckon it was the jet lag, but it was probably the stories. And I'm thinking, I've got 120 ambulances. We've got 500 staff who drive these things. We could do this. Now, to convince my board of that, they said, but no, we're about saving lives. That's not saving a life.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, but it's about dignity for people who have lived and contributed, well to this. So it took 2 or 3 years to get there. The donors, however, loved it, saying, well, that could be me. So so probably 2 or 3 times a month we call it Memory Lane here. Yep. We have a couple of dedicated ambulances that donors raised money for. They don't look like ambulance; they look more like camper vans. So you take that medical aspect out, even though behind all the walls there's all the medical stuff. And we've taken people to most people just want to either go home, look at their garden one more time, go to the beach, and there's so many stories that come out of it. The secret to fundraising is not statistics, it's stories. The more stories you tell, the more people will identify and give to that person or whatever. So that's one big aspect. The other is that people give to people. If they trust you and you have a good relationship with them. So I open the mail once a week. I sit in with the volunteers and open the mail, and everyone's trying to find the biggest check or the biggest donation. But for me, the real hero, the real person who's not the person who can afford it, it's the person who can't afford it. Yeah. The letter that you get from in old, very shaky handwriting saying, "Dear Scott, sorry I can't give more," whatever, and they've given $5. And you look at their address and it's an aged care home, and you think, these are the heroes. This is it, right? And so it's just a rewarding place to be.
Yeah. Would you do you say memory lane is one of your proudest achievements?
It is. Through life, if you put yourself in vulnerable positions, I mean, I tell lots of stories. I tear up as I am a little bit now because of the not. I don't want passionate people. I want compassionate people, because passion runs out after a while, but compassion doesn't.
Yeah,
it's
true.
part of your DNA. So it is. When AJ, who was at 42, she's dying of cancer. She just wants to go down to the beach one more time and feel the sand between her toes. So often it's a sensual moment that they want. I want to see the rose garden that my wife, who died 14 years ago, planted one more time. Okay, I want to go to my final Anzac Day dawn service one more time. That was good, and I wish there were more of that. We worked with there's all the medical permission slips and family consent forms and all the rest of it. But I went on one or two of them, and it's just life changing when you're sitting with someone who knows that they've got limited time. People only get one, so you can't. It's not a. We're not a social service. You get one trip only. But it's almost a cash cow. The donations roll in because people can identify. So I wish I had that for my mum or my dad. Hope this is around when I'm like this. A 14-year-old girl who wanted to go to a concert to see someone, her favourite singer. So we took her, but it wasn't just, the concert. We'd organised for the singer, so she went backstage. AJ, who went down to the beach, she's laying out clothes or giving instructions to lay out clothes. Which outfit will I use? What girlfriends can I invite? It just gives them, and in a way, it's a celebration of life, and it gives a happy memory rather than a sad memory at the end. Yeah, so I'm pretty proud of that. The other one was a Sri Lankan story. I was acting CEO of the city of Melbourne when the tsunami hit. We put on a concert at the My Music Bowl. We raised $500,000, and I was fortunate enough, because the CEO came back, so I didn't have to act as CEO. But 3 weeks after the 2004 tsunami, to go across to the southern part and see the devastation, but to try and find some projects that we could put this towards. And we ended up building a school in Dickwella, and it was a devastated community. It was a kilometre in from, so it didn't get hit, but all the other schools, the kids from other schools, and lucky it was school holidays at the time, were sending their kids to this school, so it was overcrowded. There's only one set of toilets, which for the girls, boys were behind the trees. Overwhelmed with too many kids, and rusty corrugated outdoor classrooms with bricks or rocks on them so it wouldn't blow off. Dangerous stuff. Yeah. So we built a 3-story, 9-room school. And it became the centre of the community itself. So on weekends there was a computer club, and we got computers, and there was a sewing circle, and so we got some sewing machines, and the oval became a market garden and those sorts of things. And I went back with the Deputy Lord Mayor at the time, probably about 2 or 3 years later, to the opening. and the school had won the Sri Lankan dance competition or something. I can't remember. They were so proud, and
Yeah.
I'm sitting up there at the end with it's like the king and the queen and a parade and flowers and
Yeah.
But it wasn't for yourself. It was just we've made look at the difference
Impact.
we've made to the impact. That's right, the impact. So there's been a few proud moments over my time, and I've been lucky because you put yourself in these vulnerable or difficult places, and if it works out, it works out.
And Scott, you were made a member of the Order of Australia. What did that mean to you?
Well, it would have meant more if my mum and dad were still alive.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, dad passed away in 2018, mum in 19. And you don't know you're getting one of these until you get a phone call saying, and it's interesting, if you were nominated or if you were awarded, would you accept it? That's an interesting phone call, because obviously they don't want people saying, no, I don't want it. So I said, oh, well, yeah, I would. Thanks. You have to keep this secret, but you don't know. So you're waiting for another 3 months.
Yeah.
And you forget about it, obviously, and then you'll get the letter saying, well, you've actually been nominated, and not everyone who's nominated gets it, and you're awarded. Who nominated? You want to know who did it. They don't tell you, but so you try and work that out. So it was pretty. I got to have the kids and their partners there at the ceremony. Obviously, I knew the governor through the work that I do. She's our patron and everything else. But I wear the pin proudly, not to show off, but just because being recognised by your country to that you've done good work is a proud moment. When you start, I go back to being in Cubs, and you get your first proficiency badge for I don't know, whatever it is, housekeeping or stamp collecting or something, right through to that. It was a great moment.
Yeah, yeah. And after 14 years working for Flying Doctors, and 2024, you decided to, retire from.
Yeah, I did. So I was 66. Now I'm 68, 69, and I'm 70 next year, and it's gone quickly. I just thought, there's other things that I want to do.
Yeah.
But I wasn't ready to play golf and mow lawns.
Yeah.
And I've always been on committees or boards. I'm a fellow of the AICD and a few others. Because I believe you've got to, if you're going to do things, you've got to keep your skills and your knowledge up. So it gave me an opportunity to think about what else I wanted to do. But before I actually got to that, I was starting to field phone calls. Would you come on our board? And because you got lots of connections, and because I've worked in education and health and retail and banking, and you got lots of contacts. Yeah. It hasn't just been in one career stream. And I received a phone call from the international flying doctors based in Africa, in Kenya, and they were looking for a chairman. So I'm now the chair of the AMREF International Flying Doctor Service based out of Nairobi. So that gave me an opportunity to go, which I couldn't do that if I was here. Yeah. And really it's about taking what I've learnt from a developed, mature flying doctor service to, I don't know if I'm allowed to say developing country, but a country where there's lots of challenges. So I really enjoy that, and then I sit on a number of other boards as well.
So what do you look for when before you say yes to those opportunities?
Well, you need to do some due diligence because you've also got your reputation, and that's being a bit selfish. Yeah, you spend a lot of time building up. You're in branding. Yeah, what's your own brand? What do people,
personal brand?
Yeah, your personal brand. Yeah. So you do spend a bit of time trying to craft that, and you should, so that people know what they're getting. So you don't want to put that at risk. So you need to do a bit of due diligence on the organisation itself. Has it is it financially viable? Is it doing good work, or are there any court cases hanging over its head? All these sorts of things. But even if even sometimes it might fail my due diligence test. It's often the people who, the person who's asking you to do it. I'm patron of the CDF charity, and the person who asked me to do it is that person a good person? Are they doing their best? Do they need help? And I remember buying a book which was a book that said, it was called "When I Say No, I Feel Guilty," and it was to try and cue you to learn to say that it's okay to say no. I'm not very good at that.
Yeah.
Because I think, well, if I can help or I can do something in some way, and that's how you end up on 13 boards and in trouble at home.
Yeah, still got plenty of time to play golf, Scott. Yeah.
There's plenty of time for that. But I've always looked for things where, in talking to people who, career counselling, I say, look, the perfect job is not there, but the potential of it is. So, but the first thing you need to work is, what are you looking for? Not what can you do, but what do you want to do? I can do that and I can do that, but do you want to do it?
Yeah.
So I had a list after I left government. It was about 12 things. I wanted something that the family would be proud. Would the family be proud of this? Can they be involved in it? And they come to flying doctor dinners and things like that. Is there enough to live on? If it's a job. Is it broad or narrow? All those sorts of things. So I just do that test and see whether or not it's something I can certainly do. There's lots of things I'm thinking about as you're asking the questions, and it's a privilege to be asked these questions.
Yeah.
Because it brings it all back to why you do it, how you do it, and what you hope to leave.
Yeah.
What's the legacy at the end
Absolutely,
of it.
yeah.
And speaking of legacy, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Well, that was my legacy. Jeez, I'm not that old, but there were two things that, because someone's asking, what did you learn from your mum and dad? Mum always had a saying, which was, good, better, best. Never let it rest until your good is better and your better's best. All right. So always do your best. Okay. Yeah. And it might not work out and you might fail, but you've had a crack and you've done the best you can. If people can see that and learn from that. Dad, on the other hand, and it helped balance everything, he said, son, 95% of what you worry about never happens. All right? Because you can get anxious and worried about, is it the right thing, the wrong thing, will it work, won't it, all that sort of, will they think this, 95% of what you worry about doesn't happen. So in a way, chill. So mum's got me over here busting out, doing my best.
Yeah.
Dad's saying, just take it easy.
Yeah.
It'll all work out in the end.
Yeah.
I belong to the Centre for Optimism, which is one man who's the chief optimism. He calls himself the chief optimism officer. And he's got podcasts and he does and all the rest of it. And it's about optimism. Now, optimism isn't happy, clappy, everyone's happy sort of stuff. It's about a simple saying that is, all will be well. In other words, it will be okay in the end.
Yeah.
And having that attitude that, okay, we're going into this.
Do your best.
Do your best. If you're going to wait for all the lights to be green before you leave home, you'll never leave home.
Yeah.
All right. But if you've got a couple of green lights, let's start the journey and work it out as we go. Let's build a plane while we're flying it, sort of thing. In some cases, with regards to new projects. So I guess my legacy is, and I tell my kids and others, one, have a crack, do your best. If it doesn't work out, it wasn't meant to be. And that's a blend of those two. So I guess my legacy is just, you hope that there's services that are left behind. But I'm also quite aware that I'm relevant now, but I'll be irrelevant soon. My ego is not such that I need to be important or name in lights. Yeah. You've made your contribution. You lie down at the end of it and say, well, I've done as good as I can. A couple of things I mucked up along the way. It's not everything's perfect. Yeah. But it's that optimism.
That's life.
And it's been a good life.
Yep.
A lucky life.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Let's-
Scott, honestly, we could talk for hours, but I'm cautious of your time. I know you're a busy man and you've got places to be. But before we wrap up, I'd love to know, given your definition of success was largely around impact, do you feel successful?
Yeah, I think I feel successful in life. It's not just in your work life and not just in home life. I mean, I've gone through a broken marriage, and that's a failure, a public failure, when you spend most of your time trying in the public not to fail. And I lament that. There's other things that have happened that but I think I've made the best decisions that with the information I've had at the time, and my intention is pure. And I remember learning this about it comes from leading teams, and it's about if you have to have a hard or difficult discussion, let's call them genuine discussions, not hard or difficult. And there's two aspects of a genuine discussion. One is your intention is pure. You're not trying to beat the other person or show them how clever you are. There's an issue. My intention is to solve the issue. My intention is pure. And that you believe it to be right at the time. It might be wrong later down the track in hindsight, but at the time, based on what you know, you do it. I've had a pretty good life. The kids are good. They're all happy. There's three things you want for your kids. One is, they've got their own home, they've got a job, and they've got somebody in the world who says that you're the most important person to me. That's all worked out well, so I'm very happy with that. Good friendships. It's been a good life. I'm lucky. I'm really lucky. Yeah.
And Scott, throughout this discussion, I've been trying to jot down what I think are some of the core traits which have led to your successful life, and I'd like to share them with you. The first one I think is you're very impact driven. I think that comes from your definition of success. And more than just like talking about impact, you want to see the impact actually get done. And I think that's a really important thing, maybe like being action oriented. The next one is curiosity. And I think throughout your journey, you've kind of just been looking for opportunities across the road, and also looking for opportunities for cross-pollination as well between different industries, between all of the things that you've worked on in your career. How can you bring those opportunities together? And then the last one is thinking long-term. And I think that's something which is, maybe a little bit more rare, is you understand that sometimes you have to make that short-term sacrifice for the long-term gain. And I think, you shared a few stories where that is rung true. And I think that's led to a lot of the success that you've had.
Yeah.
I think you've just summed up my life in a couple of sentences. But yes, I'm attracted to the next shiny thing. That can be good, that can be bad. Curiosity, it's interesting that creative people are often seen as artists and all the rest of it, but I think people in leadership positions in business have to be creative. Creative solutions,
storytellers. Yep.
You have to find a way in which you can to bring everyone with you, because I said it's no good leading if no one's following.
And to add to that list of amazing traits that you have, I think you're also very trustworthy, very genuine, and that helps you, I would say, authentic, and that would help you to build relationship. I mean, we only met you yesterday in person, I guess, we just talk like friends, like we met like 20 years ago, right? So you have that ability of connecting with people, because what you see, what you get, you have that authenticity.
Yeah, I think you have to. You can't get caught up in your own ego, or your own success, or your own infallibility. You're just another person in the world doing the best they can, believing that everyone else is doing the best they can.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's it. So look, this has been a privilege. We're sitting here in a room. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, and I listened to one or two of your podcasts. So thank you for the opportunity to share my story, and hopefully listeners or viewers will get a couple of gems out of it.
Absolutely. And Scott, thank you so much
Thank you so
for fitting
much,
us
Scott.
into your busy schedule. And for our listeners, if you've gotten something from today's episode, it would mean the world if you can like and subscribe so we can share these stories to more and more ears. And you can see all of our episodes over at our website, thequestforsuccesspodcast.com. And with that, we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening.